What is it to be human? Who am I? What's the purpose of life? Where did we come from? Where are we going? What's valuable? What's important? Every culture has different answers to these questions. And I'll tell you how I see our culture's story of the people and story of the self. I'll start with the story of the self. So the story of the self, it says, what are you? It says you are this separate being, this robot made of flesh that's a container for soul or mind, depends on if you're religious or not, walking around in this objective universe. In biology, and so every field has its own version of this. Biology says that you are a biophysical contraption programmed by your genes to maximize reproductive self-interest. Economics says pretty much the same thing, that you're fundamentally driven to maximize your economic self-interest. Physics says that you are, again, this kind of contraption operating in an external universe subject to deterministic forces. This is obsolete physics, but it still defines the way that we think. It's obsolete biology too, by the way. Spirituality, religion says that we're these skin-encapsulated souls, separate from other skin-encapsulated souls. Philosophy says that you're like this kind of bubble of psychology, walking around, floating around this mote of consciousness, peering out into the world. And that's what you are, you're separate. So from that arises pretty much every institution of our culture. For example, there's all of these competitors out there. So to be safe and to be healthy, you have to control them, conquer them, and defeat them. And from that, we get our dominant paradigms of medicine. There's these germs out there. They're fundamentally not our friends because they're programmed by their genes to maximize their self-interest. Our economic system is like that too. That's why the political discourse is all about competitiveness. And from this point of view, if you have any stroke of good fortune, it's not like those gift economies I was talking about, because now you're getting more of that limited amount of money, and you're better able to compete. So envy is built into this. Someone else's good fortune and someone else's excellent abilities, that harms my interest. And in fact, if you have a stroke of ill fortune and become less able to compete, that's good for me, according to this paradigm. In our hearts, we know that that's not true. We know that on some level, somehow, the suffering of any being is somehow our own suffering too. But our logic, our scientific logic contradicts that. So one of the effects of this story of the self is a disconnect between heart and mind. Our heart says one thing, our mind says something else. Well, you can see that our money system embodies and perpetuates the story of the separate self. It throws us into competition. It makes it true, even if it were not fundamentally true. It enacts the story. All right, story of the people. Where did we come from? And where are we going? And what's our purpose on earth? Well, it says that once upon a time we were animals, helpless and ignorant, but thank goodness for our big brains that allowed us to develop technology and to become the masters of nature. Our control isn't complete yet, but we're getting there. Someday we will transcend nature completely. We will conquer the atom. Conquer, it's always conquer. We will conquer outer space. We will conquer death even. Just like we overcame the sound barrier and split the atom, there's no limit to our ascent. I call this myth ascent, the ascent of humanity. 50 years ago, people totally believed in this. They thought someday we will eliminate all insects and have a garden earth. We'll eliminate all the bad species, all the harmful species, all the pests. We'll spray DDT everywhere. And pollination will be done by machines. We'll have hydroponics, or we'll synthesize our food. We won't even need nature anymore. Everybody believed it, almost. But we don't believe it anymore, because our stories are changing. One reason they're changing is that they're not working anymore. Not very many people still think that all disease will be conquered by the year 2000. But that was what top medical researchers were saying in the 1950s. It was obvious, you know? I mean, cholera and smallpox and plague and diphtheria and tetanus, polio, they had all succumbed to modern medicine, the arsenal of modern medicine. So of course, cancer is next, heart disease, but it hasn't happened. In fact, instead, all these new diseases are appearing that our methods of conquest and control are helpless against. That's just one example.